to the pros and cons of each system, let's first have a look at the history of these two OSs. We'll start with Android. The company Android Inc. was founded in 2003 by a bunch of guys, but the one you've most likely heard of is Andy Rubin. At first, the idea was an operating system developed for digital cameras, not phones, but soon the creators changed their minds and announced that their technology would soon rival Microsoft Windows Mobile. Not many people believed that, and it wasn't easy getting this company going. In fact, it's been reported that they were so broke they couldn't afford to pay for their office space, and even the founders' closest friends didn't really believe they were onto something. Google, however, did believe in their OS and acquired it from Android Inc. along with key members of the company. There was a lot of secrecy surrounding Android and its acquisition, but the rumors started to get out that Google was developing its own software for mobile phones, and little did we know how quickly this software would be in most of our pockets. Then in 2007, Apple dropped a bombshell and released its iPhone. Prior to this, Google's operating system was developed only to run on standard phones, not ones with touchscreens. When the iPhone came out, the Android team knew they had a lot of work to do. That same year, a group called the Handset Alliance came together and made the bold statement that they would create the first truly open and comprehensive platform for mobile devices. Members of this alliance were Google, Samsung, HTC, and Motorola, as well as others. They weren't just full of hot air either, and soon we saw a bunch of different versions of Android. These were Cupcake, Donut, Eclair, and Froyo. Later, we got KitKat. You might be wondering why computer software was named after things that you eat, and Google later answered that, saying it was because the mobile devices running the software made life sweet. The first Android phone was the T-Mobile G1, or HTC Dream as it was called outside of the USA. The reviews were mixed, but many people did say that the OS had a lot of potential. Now for the iPhone and iOS. In 2005, the one and only Steve Jobs had a huge job to do: shrink the Mac and make the perfect handheld device. In 2007, Apple announced this new phone along with its operating system. The first of the systems was called the iPhone OS 1. And unlike Google, Apple didn't go for sweet-sounding names and just kept counting up in numbers.
Before we start comparing them, however, we need to just do a brief segment on how they operate. At first glance, Android and iOS may seem quite similar, at least as far as interface is concerned. But there are some fundamental underlying differences in how they function. iOS is Apple's proprietary mobile operating system, and as such, it's fine-tuned to make the most out of a device's hardware. What's more, Apple keeps a very close eye on all third-party software that's being developed for their mobile operating system. Android OS, on the other hand, may be owned by Google, but it's an open-source OS based on a Linux kernel. This basically means that anyone is free to improve and change it as they see fit. Android is much more widespread because of this, but it also means that it's more open to security threats and some logistical hiccups, but more on that later. Now with that out of the way, let's start comparing the two. The first category that we'll have these operating systems duke it out in is performance. Stop us if this sounds familiar. iPhones are overpriced because their hardware is bad. This has got to be the argument that's thrown around the most against iPhones. And there is some truth to it. Just look at the latest Android flagships shipping with 4, 6, or even 8 GB of RAM, while the latest flagship iPhones are still stuck at 4. The older models usually boasting just 2 or 3 GB of RAM. But here's the thing. iPhones simply don't need more RAM because their operating system is so well optimized that it can juggle over a dozen apps effortlessly with just as little as 2 GB of RAM. Meanwhile, Android phones with just as much or even more RAM often fall behind in terms of memory management and multitasking. So while iPhones do indeed have worse hardware specs, they've also proven that on-paper specifications aren't everything. And the same goes for their CPUs. It was only recently that iPhones upgraded to hexa-core processors with the iPhone 8, while the older models use either quad-core or dual-core CPUs. Meanwhile, it's pretty commonplace to see an octa-core processor even in mid-range Androids. It has been for years now. But once again, due to better optimization, it's not unusual to see that last year's iPhone beat the latest Android flagship in benchmarks, let alone the weaker mid-range phones. If we were judging the hardware on its own, then Android would have won this round. But given that we're taking performance here, the victory goes to the iOS.
So let's begin with a boot up in 3, 2, 1 and see which one gets there first. Now do keep in mind that this is the first time Samsung has ever put like a 120 Hz display on their smartphones in terms of their mainstream flagship device. I mean, this is so smooth, it's ridiculous. We're going to talk about it in this video, but the Apple iPhone has always been very smooth. So let's see what happens here. Samsung with the first win here on the boot up. Snapdragon 865 on the left, 12 gigabytes of RAM, and over here we have 4 gigs of RAM in the Apple A13 Bionic. Now, both the Galaxy S20 Ultra and the 11 Pro Max have the face unlock, but with the S20 Ultra, you can kind of just bypass the lock screen right there, although it's not super secure. So Samsung's fastest, most secure method is going to be the in-display fingerprint sensor. Now, you can actually activate this if you know where it's at, like so, with the screen black. So it's pretty nice feature right there. Now with the iPhone, you do have Face ID, and it's kind of a two-step process. There's still no feature to go ahead and bypass the lock screen over here, but it's still very fast. So this is really just going to come down to preference, but I do think it's a little bit faster on the Samsung to have the in-display fingerprint sensor, because you don't really have to look at it and swipe. You can kind of just remember where it's at. Sometimes you miss, but you can just get into the phone a little bit faster here for the Galaxy S20 Ultra. Now, quickly confirming the software on both. One UI 2.1 with Android 10 here for the Galaxy S20 Ultra. Now over here for this iPhone, we do have iOS 13.3.1 on board here for this speed test. And I do want to mention one thing before we begin the app test. I will have the 120 Hertz on throughout the duration of this video, because that's the way I'm leaving it as I use this phone, and that's the new feature, so I'm leaving that one on for this test. There is no animation tweaking happening though. I'm going to leave default animations on. And so here we go. Let's go into calendar 3, 2, 1, and you can see, look like the S20 Ultra had that. Now both very smooth on the gestures. Let's go to clock, and you could see a slightly faster animation for the Galaxy S20 Ultra. Let's go into calculator. And again, slightly faster there. And this is not tweaking anything. This is no 0.5x, nothing like that for S20 Ultra. Let's go into settings. You can see S20 Ultra again beating the 11 Pro Max. Let's go into weather. iPhone 11 Pro Max beats the S20 Ultra slightly, and I think that's due to the loading up of ads in Samsung's weather app. So I probably would get that out of there if you want better speed, Samsung. Let's go into Twitter. And you can see that Twitter opened first there for the Galaxy S20 Ultra. Let's go to the profile page, and you see how the Galaxy S20 Ultra is rocking on the table. That's because of that camera bump. Let's go into Snapchat, 3, 2, 1, and you can see Snapchat again to the S20 Ultra. Let's go into Instagram, and you can see again the S20 Ultra. So, wow, Samsung has got a really fast phone here. There's no doubt about that one. And this one I'm pretty certain is going to stay fast because of that 120 Hertz. Let's go into speed test. iPhone wins that one right there. But it looked like the S20 was pretty close, if not a little faster, getting the actual network. Let's go into Amazon. And you can see S20 Ultra again. And look at how smooth that scrolling is for the S20 Ultra. Very fast and smooth. iPhone's still very smooth. I'm not taking anything away from that device. Let's go into eBay. And you can see eBay first there for S20 Ultra, and then iPhone 11 Pro Max. Pandora. And you can see Pandora. Which one's it going to be? I couldn't even see that one. I think it was the iPhone. Let me know down below. Let's go into Geekbench 5. That one was the iPhone. So the iPhone's still getting some wins here. Let's go into PUBG Mobile. 3, 2, 1. You know, you think every time a new phone comes out, oh, it's just going to be faster in every respect. But a lot of applications are super well optimized for iPhone. So even if you have a faster screen, it doesn't mean you have a faster app loading time. So you can see the iPhone doing quite well here and ready to get in the match. So the game wins there for the iPhone, but the gameplay should be better for the Galaxy S20 Ultra in terms of smooth, because the 120 Hertz is just going to make games a joy and a larger display. And so let's go into the next game and see which one can get here first. The iPhone was fast right there. Let's hit play and see which one can play first. So it looks like the games are still just better optimized for the iPhone just a little bit. But I'm telling you, the smooth feel of this 120 Hertz frame rates, that's enough to make a gamer want to use this phone over this. Because we're just talking about load times. But what would you rather have? A smoother gameplay or better load times? I'm not trying to say that the iPhone games aren't smooth. They're super smooth. But if you want to have a super smooth frame rate, this one's going to be probably where it's at. Let's go into Mortal Kombat 3, 2, 1. And let's see what happens here. Now, iPhone seems to be a little bit ahead here over the Galaxy S20 Ultra. And again, you can put the fastest screen on your phone, but if the apps are better optimized, the iPhone is going to win every time. And here it goes. The iPhone wins. So I don't think the S20 Ultra is like crushing the iPhone 11 Pro Max. I do think it's faster in a lot of respects though. And the best attempt ever against an iPhone, definitely, so far. So pretty close. Again, this is not enough of a difference to, make you want to pick one over the other. It's going to come down, I think, to other preferences. Let's get out of here. And so that's it.
Performance, apps that are safer and more stable, long-term OTA updates, and better long-term value. Meanwhile, the Android phones are generally cheaper, allow for a much greater degree of freedom, have a customizable interface, a greater variety of apps, as well as a greater variety of devices to choose from. In the end, both operating systems and their hardware platforms have their advantages and disadvantages. So the ultimate answer as to which is better will end up being largely subjective and dependent on what you're looking for in a phone. And there you have it, iOS versus